In the year 1866, the cannons had fallen silent, but the echoes of war still haunted the American soil. Smoke no longer curled over the fields of Gettysburg, but the scars of battle lay deep across the land and in the hearts of its people. Elias Carter, a former Union soldier, returned home not to cheers, but to silence. His family's land in Pennsylvania was overgrown, his younger brother's grave freshly filled with earth, and the war medals in his hand felt heavier than any rifle he'd carried. Elias had believed in the cause, had marched under the stars and stripes believing that unity and freedom would rise from blood. But what he saw now in his home and in his country made him question if the Union had truly been restored, or if the pieces were simply forced back together with fear and finance. The South was broken, but the North was restless. Factories were booming, railroads were expanding, but the working men, those who had bled for the flag, remained in chains of poverty. Elias could feel it in his bones. Something wasn't right. One rainy morning, as Elias sorted through his brother's belongings, he found a bundle of letters tied with a fraying blue ribbon. His brother Samuel, also a Union soldier, had kept a journal and written letters never sent. One, dated just days before his death at the Battle of Cold Harbor, caught Elias's eye. It spoke of a meeting, a secret one, between Union officers and Southern businessmen. Samuel had overheard conversations about prolonging the war to benefit industrial contracts, about dividing post-war assets, and ensuring the correct men held power afterward. Elias's hands trembled. What had his brother discovered? He could not ignore it. Against the advice of friends, Elias traveled to Washington, D.C., seeking answers. The city buzzed with Reconstruction politics, with senators arguing over how far freedom should go and how soon the South should be reaccepted. Former Confederate leaders walked freely in the Capitol, some in meetings with Union generals, others signing contracts with railroad tycoons. Elias began asking questions. Doors closed quickly. Names that once welcomed him now whispered behind his back.
Through an
Still,
old war contact,
he persisted.
Elias was introduced to a radical journalist named Henry Winslow. Together, they followed a trail of money and letters, leading them to a private group known as the Dominion Pact, a consortium of Northern bankers, Southern plantation heirs, and political brokers. The group had allegedly planned parts of the war's endgame: land seizures, bank rollouts, and the management of freed slaves as wage laborers. Elias read minutes of meetings where men debated not how to rebuild the South, but how to own it. He discovered a ledger. It detailed financial transfers from Northern banks to Southern estates before the war ended. He saw names of senators receiving shares in new industrial companies rising from the ashes of burned-out Southern towns. Elias's faith shattered. The war, which had claimed over 600,000 lives, had not ended in peace, it had ended in profit for the few and poverty for the many. The next weeks were filled with surveillance, shadows following his steps. Elias met with a black preacher named Reverend Talbot, who shared similar suspicions. Freedmen were being promised land and rights, only to have them stripped away through bureaucracy and intimidation. Elias realized this was more than a betrayal of soldiers, it was a betrayal of the very promise of America. Determined to expose the truth, Elias and Winslow prepared to publish their findings. They printed a special edition of the People's Voice, detailing the Dominion Pact's activities, naming names, and demanding a congressional inquiry. The story exploded. Protesters gathered. The president's office issued a statement of concern. But power moves swiftly. Within a month, Elias was arrested under charges of sedition, accused of fabricating documents and endangering national security. Winslow vanished. The press that printed the story was burned by unknown rioters. In his cell, Elias was offered a deal: recant the story, sign a statement of falsehood,
During his trial,
and he would walk free.
Elias stood alone,
He refused.
labeled a traitor by the very country he had fought to defend. Former comrades testified against him, either out of fear or bribery. But the truth had already begun to take root. Leaked copies of the story had reached cities across the North and South. Freedmen held readings in churches. Union widows passed the papers among sewing circles. The truth was out. Sentenced to 10 years in federal prison, Elias used his time to write. His manuscript, titled The Forgotten Oath, chronicled his experiences, the conspiracy he uncovered, and his dream of a truly united America, one that honored its promises not just in word but in deed. Years passed. Elias died in prison in 1879. His name faded from the newspapers, buried beneath political headlines and industrial triumphs. But history has a way of remembering those who spoke truth at the cost of their freedom. In the 1960s, during the height of the civil rights movement, Elias's granddaughter, Sarah Carter, found his writings hidden in an attic chest. She was a teacher, an activist, and a believer in truth. She read her grandfather's words and wept. Then, she published them. The book became a lightning rod, quoted in speeches by civil rights leaders, referenced in classrooms, debated in Congress. For the first time, many Americans saw the Civil War not just as a moral crusade, but also as a battleground of economic manipulation. Elias's story forced a re-examination of Reconstruction, of racial justice, and of who truly writes history. Today, a statue of Elias Carter stands not in a battlefield, but outside a public library in Baltimore. The plaque reads, "He loved a country that did not love him back, but he spoke so it might one day learn how." The United States of America has always been a nation in progress, a land forged by ideals, but tested by greed, division, and silence. Through the voice of a single soldier, buried under decades of denial, came a reminder that patriotism is not blind loyalty, it is the courage to demand better from the country we call home. Let his story be a lesson. Let it be a warning. And above all, let it be a call to every generation, to question, to uncover, and to never forget the oaths made in the name of freedom.